Thanks to all the subscribers. Please like and subscribe. I have a crazy one for you today. With that said, let's get into it. According to the government, Christian John, the former leader of the Whole Street Crew, a violent criminal gang, murdered and tortured multiple people, sometimes with gang member Marvin Johnson. Johnson and John were both convicted of the brutal 2006 murder of Earle Kevin Obermuller. The two men lured Obermuller to the basement of an abandoned Bed-Stuy brownstone, duct taped his entire head, and watched him suffocate to death, after which they set him on fire, according to the investigation. Obermuller was found tied to a chair and severely burned on a bed of charcoals, the 2006 criminal complaint said. Christian John was found guilty of the 2000 murder of Charlemagne Lormond, the 2008 murder of Barry Haynes, the 2008 murder of DeQuayne Shelton, and the 2011 murders of Jason Bostic and Aaron Formey. During the 2011 murders of Jason Bostic and Aaron Formey, John ordered his crew members to bind the victims with duct tape and to kill them. Among his many other crimes, John was also found guilty of assaulting a crew member by tying him up and pouring scalding water over his body as retaliation for the crew member being disloyal to John. The Hull Street Crew was a violent criminal gang that operated in the Bushwick, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and East New York areas of Brooklyn for more than a decade. According to the government, the gang operated in racketeering, murder, attempted murder, murder for hire, armed robbery, narcotics distribution, and gambling on dogfighting. Several witnesses testified that John recruited others and gave them orders to sell marijuana and cocaine. He also planned and directed others to assault and murder those whom he perceived as rivals or threats to his ventures. His confederates obeyed these orders. This structure persisted over a number of years. John objects that the gang was nothing more than a collection of independent street operators. He also notes that they committed crimes against each other as often as they worked together. For example, John was convicted of planning to murder Johnson and of beating up another alleged member of the enterprise, Michael Farmer. Finally, John argues that the cooperating witnesses who testified against him did not think of themselves as racketeers or members of an enterprise, but as John's brothers and friends. Close ties and friendships are not inconsistent with membership in an enterprise. After all, the enterprise that Rico was originally intended to combat was organized into 5 families. Attorney Capers stated, "Today's sentence marks a day of closure for the 6 families whose loved ones were senselessly murdered, and for the Brooklyn communities where John and his violent crew wreaked havoc for more than a decade." After a 17-day jury trial, Christian John was convicted of racketeering conspiracy, drug distribution conspiracy, robbery conspiracy, murder for hire conspiracy, charges relating to the murder of 5 individuals, the attempted murder of a 6th, and an assault on a 7th, and possession and use of a firearm in connection with various other crimes. His co-defendant, Marvin Johnson, was acquitted of the racketeering conspiracy charges, but convicted of participation in the drug distribution conspiracy, robbery conspiracy, use of a firearm in connection with those conspiracies, and participation in one of the murders. In a supplemental letter briefed to the court, Christian John makes 2 additional arguments. First, he argues that there was insufficient evidence that the conspiracy to rob marijuana dealers had an effect on interstate commerce. The stipulated testimony of a narcotics agent that marijuana grown in New York State is seldom distributed in large quantities, and that the majority of sour marijuana, as high-priced marijuana, is grown outside of New York, was sufficient to satisfy the government's minimal burden. Second, John argues that the court failed to require the jury to unanimously agree which of 4 crimes supported its finding of guilt on the charge that he used a firearm in connection with a crime of violence or drug trafficking crime. Since, however, the jury validly reached a unanimous guilty verdict on every predicate crime alleged, the erroneous jury instruction was necessarily harmless. Christian John is currently in USP Lee, a high-security U.S. penitentiary with an adjacent minimum security satellite camp. He was sentenced to life in prison. Marvin Johnson is currently at MDC Brooklyn, and Administrative Security Metropolitan Detention Center. He was sentenced to life in prison. Although there are convictions in this matter, I must stress that an indictment is not evidence of guilt. Charges are only allegations, and each defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Blessings.